Ahoy, Squid Squad! Welcome to the first episode of Parlay, a show where the Squid Crew and Squid developers come together to chat about coding, Squid, and life in general. In this first episode, I'm joined by Colin, one of our amazing engineers. I'm eager to know what you think of this format, so let me know in the comments. Without further ado, let's parlay. Maybe we should start by introducing ourselves. That seems like a good way to go. So, hello, I'm Jen Person, developer advocate or DevRel engineer or something. I don't know. I work at DevRel for Squid. Probably if you're on the YouTube channel, you've seen me 100 times already. Just ahoy, Squid Squad. Ahoy, Squid Squad. So I'm really excited to have a different voice available on the YouTube channel.
Awesome. And I'm Colin. I am an engineer here at Squid. Been here pretty much since the beginning. Have spent a lot of time on the side kind of interacting with how users are actually interacting with our product and our client and our APIs, and kind of where Squid fits into the broader developer ecosystem, often focused on the front-end developer or the full-stack developer. So trying to stay kind of in tune with what's happening in the development world and seeing kind of, where our place is within that.
Yeah, I guess in that way, I would say that our two spheres are the closest maybe of like the part that the developers that I interact with, and then your side of things might be the closest that I touch with the work that I'm doing if I'm giving feedback on how people are using it. And super exciting. We just went to our first React meetup this week. So I got to talk
how was
about
that? I heard good things overall, right?
Oh, yes. I had an absolute blast. I've been waiting to actually be able to tell people about Squid since before I joined. And now that we're out of stealth, being able to talk to developers, and they immediately understood what Squid was.
Well, that's really good. That's like one of the main things is like when you release this to people, understand the benefit and the product itself and how they could start using it in their projects. And it seemed like the reception was good, or?
Yeah. Really good reception. People really understood that it sort of brought together the things that they like about the other tools that they're using, but that they can make choices about it. They really like that it's the whole concept of the middle tier.
The unopinionated is kind of how we try to phrase it, right? That it gives you the building blocks to sort of build out what you're trying to do without constraining you to a specific type of ecosystem or database or something like that, right? How many developers were there? Was it like a pretty significant chunk, or?
So I think the original RSVP was around 67.
Okay.
But then we got about 40 people because
that's a lot.
We've had a lot of rain. And yeah, actually, for that kind of thing, that's still 2/3 turnout. But
yeah,
it was really rainy and foggy and stuff. So the roads weren't great. A few people dropped out, but it seems like asking about who've been there before. It's a pretty consistent group of folks that are pretty committed to it. So that's cool.
That's awesome. I have to do a little more on my end. I'm sure there's a lot out here in Los Angeles that I haven't looked into, but it would be good to go to meetups. And so what was the format? Like, did you just can you sign up to do a demo? Is it kind of open floor when you get there to talk about whatever, or how did it sort of go?
So I reached out to the coordinator, Roberto, maybe in December or something, or early January. And I was just like, hey, I want to talk about this. And it's like, absolutely, just send me sort of a description of it that I can send out to people. And it's pretty open. And he kind of has series content that he likes to do as well. So there was an opener where he's talking about CSS tricks, and he's sort of building people's understanding of how to use CSS to do things. And then, it was just floor open to talk about Squid. So I'd come up with some slides and kind of I don't want to call it a pitch because I'm not good at the pitch thing. I just want to make it something that people actually want to use.
It's more show the product and let it speak for itself than it is sell the product, right? Yeah. Ideally, the product is something that people want, so all you have to do is show them what they can do with it. We don't have to go through we're not talking to the CTO or CMO of a company and trying to sell them like, hey, this is why you should pay for
Exactly.
it kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you do a live demo, and did it go well?
I did. Yeah. So I did our onboarding demo, and I mean, literally from like clicking the button and copying, pasting the commands and
Yep.
waiting for it to download and build and showing it and talking about the different features. It's that stock ticker demo. And yeah, at one point I was like, oh, should I dive into the code as well? But it's a fully formed app. So it's a little, I can't exactly show specific features so well in it, but I had some code snippets that I'd put on slides explaining some of the features.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah,
It's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem with the onboarding app, because you want it to look really good and be impressive, but like building a front end is kind of complicated. Like outside of the part that Squid abstracts away with the real-time data updates and everything like that, it's just like building out your components and your drop downs and your UI elements. There's just a lot of code there. And so it's hard to like dig into the specific place inside a specific component where we're pulling in data from Squid and demo that easily. We have some really lightweight, like early on not onboarding, but like sample apps that are, pretty bare bones. And they're easy to understand from a code perspective, but they don't look as good, right? So it's like,
right, exactly.
That's the best way to do it. I think having a big repository of sample apps the way we do is probably the right approach. But I think we should probably also have some generic style sheet that we can add to everything. So even if you're just making a button or a link or a list or something like that, it like at least is Squid branded. So even those sample apps like look kind of, there's a little pop of something to them.
Yeah, I think that would be a huge time saver too, because I sort of, at least on the sample apps I've worked on, I start with just making it work from a Squid perspective, and then I try to shoehorn in some style after the fact and some design, and then I end up having to rework a lot of it. So just kind of having, like, this is the button and the style that we use, because I've been trying to use the material framework for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if we have we should talk to Brian about that.
We should talk to Brian. I think it's something that wouldn't be that hard to put together, really. I mean, there's two parts of it. There's like basic styling, and then there's like, accessible component libraries that have like easy functionality. Like Material is sort of a combination, right? They have implicit styling, but then there's things that they have abstracted away that make it easier to use certain types of UI components.
Right.
So I don't think we would want necessarily build out a full Squid component library, but even just basic styling on top of, like, most of the time, like, a button doesn't need to be a Material UI button. It can just be an HTML button as long as it looks right, I don't think it would be that hard. It's just aligning on what the H1, H2 links, paragraph tags, lists, buttons, all that stuff looks like, and then all of a sudden we create an app and it looks pretty good out of the box.
Basically just have an app.css file that's sort of the default that we're using for things, so it already has all the different.
And we can just host that somewhere, and we don't even have to bundle it in the sample app. We can just put it as a script tag in the head. So you don't even have to look through the code or see all that code. It's fetched like any other CSS file. It could be from, some CDN somewhere, and it just automatically styles your app without having to blow the code set.
That's brilliant, actually, because then there's less noise in the app itself, too.
Exactly,
Even though it's just one file, just the fewer files you can have that aren't specifically showcasing the Squid stuff, the better.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this too from not a lot about it, but from the backend perspective too, right? Every time we initialize the Squid backend, we create the main file and there's a lot of, it's not fluff. It's all necessary to start running the Squid server, but it is boilerplate, right? And it's the same every time. And I wonder if there's a world where we can include, because it doesn't really change, if we can include that in the CLI instead or in the start command, such that it doesn't actually need to be code that's bundled with your app. It's bundled as part of a dependency, right? So like the Squid CLI is a dependency, or the Squid local backend is a dependency already that's in here. So you don't actually have to have those files living inside of your directory, your backend directory. But we looked into that initially. I think it was complicated because of how those files need to be able to import your custom services, right?
Right.
So it's like they're almost completely generic, except for the fact that they build as a part of your whole backend. So we can look into that and figure that out later. But I think there's small things like this that we can do to make it like the developer experience like even easier and easier and easier, which we want to like think about
exactly
for sure.
And then it comes down to like bundle size and
bundle size and just like understanding, like we have files that are like, don't touch this, and it's like, okay, but if we don't touch this, then I shouldn't even see it as a developer theoretically, right? It's just like I don't even need to know this is here. If that's part of the magic under the hood, then actually put it under the hood and abstract it away from me, kind of thing.
Very true.
And that was some feedback we got early on. I mean, we simplified it a lot, but initially, like, we had bundled like Nest and the actual like backend server that had started there, and then people started going in and adding their endpoints into like the Nest server that runs on the backend, not the Squid backend project, because they were so used to developing with a typical backend, not the way that we do it with these kind of backend, lighter weight backend functions. And we're like, wait, no, you don't actually have to modify any of this kind of stuff. You can just write these custom functions here. And people are like, oh, and when they got it, but it like wasn't immediately intuitive from setting up the backend project, I guess.
Yeah, so probably good to not have that in there.
Yeah. Did the demo went well overall though? Everything functioned right with Arculite?
Everything functioned right. Cool. And, of course I had practiced it a few times before, but you always think if there is a time it's not going to go right, that's going to be
That's during the demo. Yeah, of course.
I like to live dangerously.
Yeah, I do want to look around and see what other meetups there are and get out and talk about it. Did anybody have any, I imagine it's a very supportive environment. Did anyone have any like particularly, not hard, but like, where people like, I don't necessarily see the benefit of this, or I'm not sure how I would use this. Why is this better than XYZ? Or is that not really the...
Yeah, I would say one fella, it was pretty concerned about the fact that it's not open source.
Mm-hmm.
So more about just concerns, especially given the age of the company, like getting invested in it and then losing your resources, your, because you don't own it. And I was just very honest with him. I was like, yes, I understand, because with any service you get involved in, that is a concern. And, I'm not going to say that is never a possibility. Even though we're very well funded and we do have enterprise customers already, and but yeah, that's always a risk you can take. And even I would say, even when something is open source, there's still stuff within that is going to possibly fail, over time.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's tough, because I think there's a world where especially a lot of hobbyists and even like startup developers are really interested in the open source world. And I mean, one, it's a good community. It's good to contribute. There's transparency with what's going on there. But we're also not only building for the hobbyists, right? And there's a world where, we are also building for enterprise customers. And I think you have the opposite reaction on that end, which is, anyone can contribute here. What's stopping people from introducing, bugs that can steal my sensitive data and things like that? Like, it's all peer reviewed. Like, is this a team that I trust, or is this open to, vulnerabilities from anybody, right? So I think typically the open source community would tell you that, they're very secure with that kind of stuff, and there's a process and there's code reviews and all those kind of things. But yeah, we have to be kind of in between and position ourselves so that we can appeal to both. And there are parts that are open source. I mean, the client itself, I wouldn't say they're technically open source yet, but the client itself, and what we're doing there is not open source, but the React hooks that we're using to wrap the client are, there's no, there's quote unquote magic happening there, but there's nothing that's like, we're not opening up to see the internals of Squid, but it's wrapping the existing client and showing you how it's kind of used and transformed into the React ecosystem. And if there's bugs and things in there, people can contribute and help and update with that. I think there's also a world which we haven't gotten into yet, where we have all this integration support. And this is like not exactly open source, but the idea would be that people can add their own custom support for other types of integrations, right? So if we build out a good enough framework where if you're building a database integration or an API integration or something like that, all you have to do is come in and implement some kind of interface that we've defined that can be publicly available and published. And so even if you don't see what's happening from necessarily the time you make a request to the time it hits the database, you have a standard of, okay, this is where Squid starts to interact with my integration. And that portion of it from where, Squid calls, okay, query data, and then it queries and it runs a query on Postgres or Mongo or MySQL, that theoretically could be open sourced because that's all code that's, we want developers to be able to expand and see and things like that. And add their own integrations on top of. So I think it's a question as we go further along, like there are probably parts of the application that we would expose more to the public. There are definitely some that we will not, but I think it's like, it can only benefit and help add more integrations and more functionality on top of the platform if we create a good ecosystem that people can like expand upon too.
Yeah, that's a really good call. That's a really good point. I think that there's sort of a rich history in tech, at least throughout my lifetime, of just this sort of free and open, the idea of just having a free and open space. And I think that was maybe a much simpler concept when you just had a static web page with 200 lines of HTML. And so just sharing things in that environment and having them like freely available, it was much easier. But now it's just so much more complex than that, even for simple things. But I get it. I find that, even in my role of trying to find video editing software and, this one is making animations and, this one, with each thing that we are integrating as Squid, like, the email provider that we're going to be using. And I get frustrated. I'm like, why is everything so expensive? And it has like a cost associated with it. But there's a lot that goes into making all of these products. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think there's a lot of these products that are open source still have a paid tier to them, right? Like there's a world where like the open source gets you, and it's a good model, I think. The open source gets you into using the product, and then there's like additional features you unlock by paying, right? So like one example is with the app that we've been building. I'm using Expo, which essentially is like a good way to get a React Native app started, and it provides some functionality out of the box that React Native doesn't provide around generating your Android and iOS projects. It has some like router and configuration. It's kind of like if React, it's like the next or the remix on top of React. So like Expo is to that to React Native, I guess, is kind of how you would think about it. And it works really well and it's great and it's open source for getting started. And then there's a world where it's like, okay, now you want to build and deploy your app and actually publish it to the App Store and have updates and share that with the team. You can manage all that manually with the apps that, we've generated with Expo, or you can subscribe to Expo application services, which do all of that as well. And you can have a team and community aspect here. And it's like, I'm already in this ecosystem. This is going to save me time. And maybe in the long run, time is money. So it may save me money, actually. And I think it's a nice model, too, because he shows you something that benefits you, and then you can kind of expand on top of that. And, like, in a sense, I mean, we're not exactly that, right? Like, we're not open source from a code perspective, but you can use Squid for free, right? There's just limits to it, right? But you can get in there, you can start developing, you can start building things. You don't have to commit to Squid out of the box. Like, you can figure out what you like and what you don't like, and whether it's something that fits your use case or not. And the other thing is, since you can connect external data sources, not that we would encourage it, but if you start persisting and writing a lot of data and then you decide you don't want to use Squid, you still have ownership of your database.
Right.
We're not tying you to use the internal DB. It's something that is there and good for developers, but you don't have to use the built-in database. If you want to have something and you so choose to move off of Squid later, you still have all that data, right? So it's in a way, it's a system that you can kind of grow into and then you can migrate out of, which I think like is a concern for a lot of people, because if they don't feel the system is mature enough, or it doesn't age to their particular use case, or, God forbid it goes down completely, like users don't want to lose all their data, and they don't want to have to, rebuild their infrastructure and ecosystem. But in some ways, the Squid makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that Developers have certainly been in the situation before where they're invested in something and then it's suddenly deprecated.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that I think that does provide some peace of mind, being able to, like you said, you still have all of the sources that you're integrating with. They still belong to you, even if you decide Squid isn't for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. And yeah, obviously we have some internal, databases, right? But again, you do not have to start persisting data there. You can persist data wherever you want, which is kind of what makes Squid unique in and of itself, right? But yeah, I think it's good to hear that people understood the concepts and seem to be excited about it. Like I think we're entering a period where this is going to be kind of the real test. We have a few customers and clients that have obviously shown interest and have all around had a pretty positive experience, but it's, different working with a few people specifically and kind of, we've provided help and support along the way and things like that to kind of opening it up to a broader community and just kind of like you put yourself out there and you say, do you like it? And I hope that, you hope the answer is yes. So it's good to hear that the early signs are indicating that, I guess.
Yeah. It was yeah, there was at one point I'm like, I said, like, does it make sense? Is it clear what Squid Cloud is? Like that was kind of the big question I had, is like, does it make sense to start with? And then do you like it? So
Yeah.
getting that people get it is huge. But yeah, we'll have to sort of do a road show, so to speak, and see what people are saying along the way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out some. Well, Brian's working on some ideas for different swag that we can have. So
yeah, I feel like swag at the meetups always is helpful too. And yeah, I imagine like, I think there will be a period like this is going to be a really transformative period because hopefully we're going to get a ton of feedback, right? And, we don't know what we don't know. And, where developers are encountering friction through the initial process of, signing up and connecting an integration and getting into it. Like the onboarding experience and the basic understanding of the system is like one portion where we'll get a ton of feedback. And then as it matures a little bit, I'm sure we'll get a lot more feedback around like edge cases and, as a fully mature product and a production ready use cases where things falling apart, or where things not working correctly. And so it'll just be good to build out that community. I know we have, which I actually have to hop into, the Discord now, right?
yeah,
I want to get in there, soon and see if people are asking questions and start giving some answers and things like that. Cause I think it's a great opportunity, like, to get that real feedback right away, that we've been getting a little bit from our clients and partners, but like at a broader scale will be way more useful.
yeah, and it's a good time for folks to join the Discord and to start using Squid Cloud, because we're literally just available one-on-one to answer those questions. As Squid grows and we get more users, it might get more challenging or more delayed, but it's people messaging me today and I can answer them right now. It's a great, yeah, it's a great time to join. I put the call out. We got a few people to join from the meetup, but yeah, it's just going to be more of a process, and it helps to have our engineers in there as well.
Yeah, of course. Did you get a sense from the meetup what tools the majority of people there were building with? I mean, I imagine if you're talking, was it a React focused meetup specifically? Yeah.
Yeah, it was
so
a React ATX, so React.
I imagine lots of Next, I would think, Next.js and some Remix dropped in there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of Next, plenty of Remix. A really interesting mix of people that are based in their role are completely exclusively front end, because they have the kind of team where that's possible. And then, certainly people that the meetup takes place at a startup. I don't think we say incubator for this. I don't know. It's a building with a bunch of startups in it, and you can sort of join for a membership fee to participate in that with like mentoring and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
But they let us.
Cool.
Yeah, they let us. The React meetup has a time slot there once a month. And yeah, so there were plenty of folks from startups as well. And in that case, you're doing everything. You're doing the full stack and probably also mopping the floors. Like who knows?
Yeah.
Like you.
Well, that's one of the fun parts about being here for sure is the number of different hats that you get to wear. Sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming. Like I have to still write my blog posts, right? I've been switching through 4 or 5 different hats all week trying to figure out, okay, wait, I gotta actually get into that world as well. But that's what makes it really fun too, is like to be able to actually have full exposure. But I also worked in a capacity as what was technically just a front end developer, I guess. I mean, we had what you see as a very typical split of front end and back end teams. And I still think there's like, sometimes it's undersold, like that front end developers are still, although maybe not writing, back end code, are spending a lot of time interacting with, back end concepts and obviously back end developers, right? Like you're not writing applications in a world where there's no data source, or very rarely are you, right? The data that you're showing on your, in your app is coming from somewhere, and that somewhere is a back end, and someone has written that back end, and you as a front end developer need to understand how to consume it and what the data looks like. And I'm sure you're, in ways informing that process of like, okay, what's the contract? What are the API endpoints? What do I need for my particular use case? So like, while not being technically full stack, I think there's a lot of like understanding of, interacting with APIs and endpoints and data and modeling and things like that. And I think that's where Squid makes it really, really interesting for people who have considered themselves to be only front end developers, is like, there's still concepts you're familiar with, and now you don't need to know how to spin up and deploy your database and how to, manage all of your servers and how to horizontally scale and do all that kind of stuff. It's like we do all that for you. Now you just need to go in and add your data sources and kind of write your security rules and add your endpoints and functionality. And like, I don't know, as someone who came from a more front end background, it was like extremely intuitive by default, which is cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think and that was kind of what you're describing is exactly the angle that I took for the talk, is just basically like, do you consider yourself a full stack developer? Well, you should. It's good for marketability. You're probably going to need to do some of this stuff in the scope of your work, whether it's at a big company or a small company. And now what? So you say you're full stack, like. How do you do that? And showing that Squid makes that like completely simple. It just simplifies that.
And I mean, that's something like, I've got professional goals, and I have things I'm trying to learn on my job and things like that. But like, I also like to do, some hobby work. My fiance is a graphic designer. We work on, occasional like tech related projects together. And, we sometimes build websites for people who want brands and companies and, like all small stuff, largely static and not like tons of persistence of data or, like e-commerce or anything like that. It's all just like fun projects for friends. Is if someone comes to me and says, hey, can you make this for me? Like, I always want to be able to say yes. Like, unless it's something completely infeasible. But like the goal would be to be able to say, yeah, I can make this work. And there was a while where as a developer, if it needed, persistence of user data or state that was stored in a database or, real-time collaboration or multiple users with different accounts and authentication and things like that, I'd be a little bit like, can maybe figure this out, but like it's a little bit outside of my realm of comfort because I've spent most of my time doing more like static, front-endy work. And I honestly feel like with Squid, it's like if someone comes to me now and they're like, hey, I want something like, that can, persist some data about some users, some people can collaborate, they can upload photos, they can, share messages with each other, things like that. I'll probably like go right to Squid for that, I think. Obviously it's like in the wheelhouse that I've been developing it, but also it just feels like something that works really well for that use case. Are you even thinking we build out, we're getting married in August. We've built out our custom wedding website, at least the like initial round of it. And now we're like, probably going to have to collect RSVPs. And I'm like, okay, I'm on Zola and I'm on the Knot. And I'm like, I want this kind of be in our website, but I have to do it in an iframe and use their RSVP system. I'm kind of like, should I just use Squid? Like, should I just collect these, try to just build the RSVP thing myself? It doesn't actually seem like it would be that complicated at this point, which is a good feeling, It's like, I can like see what I'm doing here. Now, I don't want that to go wrong. And, I want to make sure I do it right. And I don't want to collect a bunch of RSVPs and then do it wrong and then lose that data and then have to email everybody again like, hey, the website didn't quite work right. So we'll see if we're actually going to do that, because I don't have tons of time to invest in that. But it's that concept of like, oh, like I can be a full stack developer, that feels like it's what makes the platform really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously we're biased because we work with Squid all day, every day. But, I started in October. So like just about 4 months. But yeah, I would say from the beginning, it was simple to pick up. So anyone that comes from a background where they've used some of these platforms as a service, we're going to feel very comfortable at Squid. It's not going to be like trying to learn a brand new system. Obviously, there are things that are unique to Squid, and the way that it works is different. But it's not like learning a brand new concept or platform.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think there's a world where, I mean, it depends. There's a bunch of different tools and technologies that developers have interacted with. I think there's probably more than two, but there's a couple buckets of like the way that users are used to data fetching and mutations. I would say there's like the more typical approach where you kind of have an API endpoint for everything, right? So it's like I'm an e-commerce site, I have a cart, right? So I make a get call and I get my cart data. And then I want to add a product to the cart. So there's probably a post endpoint or a put endpoint to add a cart item or something like that then builds out your e-commerce cart, right? And everything that you're interacting with is all like endpoints with a designated purpose that serve, X amount of data. And that's really good in a lot of ways because it's very clear what needs to be defined and there's some separation there, and you can add customizations or logging or metrics to each of those endpoints and things like that. But it's really hard when you want to do something different, like when you want to add any functionality, especially on a team where you've got front end and back end, right? It's like, okay, now we need to add a promotion to the cart. We don't have an endpoint for this. We don't have a table for this. So you kind of go over, you work with another team, you figure out, you get that spun up. What does the contract look like? You come back, you test it out. It's not quite working the right way. You go back and forth. And like, that's kind of one way of building. And then I feel like there are other tools like this, like Firebase and like Superbase is in this world too. And I think like we're entering this world, obviously, where it's like, okay, actually all the data that you have is going to be available on the client. Now it's going to be secure. So make sure that people can't access what they're not supposed to access. But like, you're not building endpoints for a particular use case. You're connecting to your data so that any app you build can access it in the right way. And it's like a slightly different mental model in some ways. I think maybe developers are growing more used to it. But it's going to be interesting to see like what kind of feedback we get around how users are interacting with the client. Is it powerful enough to do everything that they actually want to do? You can do in your endpoint, you can query 6 different tables and then join them and then serve the data down as a JSON blob. So if we're moving that over to the client, what does that mean? Is that going to be confusing for people? Do they want to write just an executable instead? And is that just going to effectively serve as an endpoint?
Right.
So it'll be like, I'm excited to get that feedback on like more complex use cases and what developers are finding works and doesn't work kind of with this mental model and the way that we've exposed it, right? Like are the APIs that we have for querying data and querying APIs intuitive or not, and those kind of things. It's all this stuff that we've spent a lot of time with and we've written documentation on and we've developed and built out. So we're really familiar. But yeah, getting that perspective from the community is like going to be really interesting.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how it'll change their workflow as well, if at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal eventually, right? Is to bring the front end and the back end closer and, turn front end developers into full stack developers and, enable full stack developers to really, develop quickly. Like in my experience developing the Squid, running the local backend, which is where I can write all my security rules and my schedulers for fetching data and my executables and things like that, and having that running side by side with my front end, to the degree where I go in and I just make one change in my back end, I save it, it automatically restarts, and then I refresh my front end, and the data that I didn't have before is now just there. Is just like full stack developers are used to this, but they're running these 2 different servers and services and things like that. But it just feels very, very like I don't know, stress free and like, there's effortless in a certain way, which is really nice. I found that in developing, the and everything, that it works really well. And I haven't had like that kind of productivity blocker from interacting, from front end to back end and things like that, which is cool.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the funny things is like, with you developing and with Victor working on his most recent like project where he builds the game, just we're like, great, now we get to be the first customers and find the issues. And of course we are finding some issues and stuff, but generally we're like, oh, well, it just works. I guess,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like multiple times, Yossi's been like, "Oh, what's your what's your feedback with Squid? Like, what's not working for you? Like, what can we fix and things like that?" And I mean, maybe we're just used to the tool that we've created, right? The platform we've created, but like, I had to like think for a while, like, what's not working for me? Because like, I'm actually spending more time building out the UI elements and like learning about transitions between screens and like how backgrounding of data works, and like it's. My main focus has not been on like problems that I've run into with Squid specifically, which is interesting.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good. That means like it actually is working and serving our use case pretty well. And yeah, and like have added a new engineer as well, who is kind of onboarding into the system. And I mean, I had a few questions, but like seems to understand it pretty well out of the gate with one, the documentation we've written, and two, just kind of like, the basic way the platform is structured is large. It seems to be somewhat intuitive, which is good.
Which is what you want to see for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think, is it getting dark on my side? Do you think I should turn on the lights?
I haven't noticed,
Okay.
but I feel like it would be such a subtle thing that I wouldn't be able to see it happening, right? Yeah.
All right, let's see how this goes.
I think that's a little better.
Oh yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Is there too much shadow now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it necessarily brightened anything. I think it just made it warmer. You know what I mean? Like more yellowy. But I don't know if it actually changed like the amount of available light necessarily.
I think I need to. I mean, I know I need like more of a lighting setup here. Like I have a light on the video camera I record on, but you're supposed to have like 3 points of light or something. Two behind.
Oh, when you're for actually good lighting I can see. I'll see right now. I have a window to this side, so I'm kind of completely lit here. I mean, I obviously have a light, but I don't think I have the right sources coming through here.
Yeah, you can just like take your phone and put it like on the one side with the flashlight to keep it out.
Let's see. Does it fully cover the? Not as strong as the natural light out of the window there. I don't think so. Yeah, I was trying to figure all this out when I did a little bit of video recording too, and I eventually was like, it's fun. It's a little bit beyond my my skill set, but even just getting the mic to work the way that I want it was like, I figured it all out eventually, I think. But my main problem is I had my mic on my desk, and as I was recording videos, I don't know if it's just a talk with my hands thing, but I would occasionally like set my hand down on the desk to emphasize a point. Like it's just I normally do. And then every time I did that, there would be a boom that came through the microphone because it would pick up. So that's why I was like, okay, I gotta do the microphone arm. It's not working having the microphone on the desk here. And I couldn't really bring myself to not do. I don't know. It just happened as I was recording the videos.
Which of course you want to be able to be natural, because anytime you have to start thinking about what you're doing, it's going to come across that you're doing that, and then it's going to be
feel like you're, I don't know, you're kind of catering to something instead of just talking about it, right?
Exactly. It's that part always makes me sweat. I go into it like just the setting everything up. I mean, I always knew I was spoiled when I got to have like the whole studio and there's someone there making sure it's looking right and everything. So having to be in charge of that is a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
But I know some other folks that have made the jump to startup, so I should probably ask them
how it's been for them too. I mean, we could get there maybe, but by the time we get there, you'll be the expert on it already, so you can be setting up the studios and everything like that too. But that's interesting. So like when you were at Firebase, would it be like if I have a video to record, like there's somebody who's doing the audio and the lighting and everything was just prepared, and you would kind of sit down and do what you had to do?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they keep track of the flubs and they run the teleprompter and they give you some tips and yeah, it was a really talented production team.
So
Yeah,
when you were there, this is the physical space that you go into, right?
yeah.
What is the background? Is the background look like did they design it to look like a home office? Is it cut away in the videos?
That's a good question. So it really it depends. So depends on the goal of the video. I had some that were green screen.
Mm-hmm.
See, now I'm hitting my microphone. So yeah, we had some that were green screen, but we quickly realized that we had to get away from that for this very reason, because they're like, it's too much work to cut around your hair.
No,
So
really.
yeah,
I don't have the same degree, but I have a little bit of that going on. I think
yeah, it was like, it's like, I bet the technology is much better now. I bet they could do both our hair like that now. But yeah, back in my day, which was
Yeah.
what, 7 years ago, not that long
Yeah.
ago, they yeah. So we would do like just either a blank white background if there were going to be slides to display
Yeah.
and
Okay.
code and stuff, or we had special shows. So if it was something that was repeating, I had like a whole stage set up with a background and some plants and like a
Oh
whole,
wow. Okay.
yeah.
That's really cool. So if it was like a routine, like if this is episode 2 or episode 3 or session, whatever, then you would be in the same space essentially set up. That's cool.
Yeah.
I feel like the green screen cutting around the hair is one of those things where when it's not done right, you can really tell. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like it's really like, oh, I could tell this was, there was a green screen there for sure. But I
Yeah.
mean, so far, I feel like our video production is really good from what I've seen.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's all done with Camtasia is the main software for stitching things together, or
Yeah. Primarily Camtasia, and for sound they have a separate thing that you can use, Audiate, which can take out a lot of your ums and ahs, and it can automatically generate transcripts if you want that,
oh,
or
that's
it can
cool.
help with echo, which is, as I said, my biggest enemy right now is the echo. Still working on that, but yeah, it definitely, it has a lot of most of the features that I need. I think if I had a wish list, I would know how to animate things better, because that would help a lot.
That's where, yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a whole job in and of itself, right? Like,
Exactly.
which is, I mean, hopefully we can get there, right? We can get someone in who, I mean, Brian, I'm sure has thoughts on this, and Brian does good like motion, or like animations on site and things like that. But that's slightly different than like video animation, right? It's a kind of a different thing. But I think eventually I want to dive back into trying to make a video or two. I got so, again, it's that wearing so many hats kind of thing. I feel like the stuff especially is like we just want to get it done, but I feel like we're entering the home stretch, and it's just one of those things where like I think we're keen to hand it off, they're keen to get it, and like everyone's been really happy with progress so far. But it's one of those things where like I'm ready to put in a lot of effort so that I can kind of not wash my hands of it, but get back to some of the core things that I love about working within the actual Squid product itself too. But yeah, I feel like I know we have the remix conversation coming up too. I want to do some exploration into that, and then maybe there's a video with Next.js or remix somewhere in there, because those are especially if we're catering to React and hobbyist devs, those are the big frameworks nowadays that people are really going in on. So we can talk more about that when we get a little closer to.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of opportunities there.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I really want to get people on board with it, but I get it in the sense that it's similar to how sometimes there might be something that theoretically could be simple enough in our code base that I might be able to do it. But it's like, well, I could sit here and figure it out and spend a week doing it, or you could do it and then you do it in like 5 minutes.
I think everyone is like, I feel like everyone on the team has, I mean, largely to your credit, gotten good initiative on, and momentum on blogs and kind of being closer to the developer community, which is really good to see. I think it's also been a fun opportunity to give people time to build with Squid, not build Squid. Right? Like, I think, like, especially like Victor with the Squid name stuff is like, from what I can tell, and you could just see how, much effort he'd already put into it, has really enjoyed that process, right? Which is fun. And it's like, I don't know. I think sometimes people can groan or be like, oh, this is outside of my, day to day as an engineer or things like that. But I feel like it's a really good skill to be able to hone, especially as we're building a product for other developers. It's like, if you don't know how to talk about the product you're building, that's, it's something you're going to want to be able to do. Right. So it's like, I think it gets like, people are a little scared of it the first time. And then once you get into it and start doing it more, it makes like, it becomes like another muscle that you can just kind of flex and build out.
Exactly.
It's a good skill to have as a developer.
And everything that people are writing has been awesome. It's been really good. And you can hear each individual voice coming through on it. And I think that's going to come across on the blog post.
Yeah, that's fun because we have a lot of personality on the team. So it'll be really good to like, if you're reading it like, oh, this is a Joey article or something like that. It would be pretty funny to see how the voices actually come through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I owe you one. I will get there hopefully very soon. But yeah, I will definitely try my best to make that happen.
Yeah, thank you. And honestly, like, there's been really good feedback that's come out of it too. Like, Tiago talking about how he's like, I need a place to link to when I'm telling people like they need to have like initialize their app and stuff, and like our docs, the getting started doesn't quite fit that. And he's like, what if I just make a blog post about it? What if we add a command that like during the onboarding, like there's Archer and then there's the Squid AI, and then like something that just builds an empty app for you, and just through the experience figuring out areas to improve. So
yeah, we should talk more about that next week too, because I think the downside to having something that just generates an empty app for you is, I mean, it's not a downside, but we're using Vite primarily as our lightweight React framework, right? And there's going to be a lot of circumstances where developers are not, right? So it can't be positioned as the actual like starting point. It would still need to be like, onboarding light, or not even onboarding, or like Vite template or something like that, right?
But exactly. And not even just like looking at, are you going to be using Vite, but are you going to be using React? Because then we're like, it's this can of worms, like, well, do we have to do that for Angular as well? Do we have to have one that's just like some sort of like, rather than covering every framework, if we just position it as like, this is how you can try things out, let's say.
Yes, exactly.
Or it's my primary use case would be at hackathons, or when we have a tutorial that was already using Vite anyway. Hey, you can use this command.
You can use this to start empty. Yeah, I think that's the right way to frame it. Because when I initially talked to Yassine about it, we were like, well, we don't want to have we don't have the get started command be using Vite, because people can be using whatever they want. But I think if we do it as like a lightweight, like a hackathon, or like a not Hello World, but that idea of like, how do we create something that's empty but ready to go that you can just start quickly working with, makes a lot of sense. Because otherwise you got to initialize Archer, and then you got to delete 50 components. Archer is React. I wasn't even sure. Archer might have been Angular too. But yeah, I like the idea. We can talk more about that with Tiago too next week, and figure out the right way to do it.
Good. Well, this is fun.
I like this one.
This has worked even better than I thought, because I just we haven't caught up in a while. I figured there's going to be plenty to talk about anyway.
Yeah, it's a good way to test this out. I'm very curious. I mean, we definitely put it to the test. I figured our previous one was 10 seconds, and this is going to be 50 minutes. So I'll be very curious to see how the video. I mean, it says I've got it uploading in the right that says 99%. So maybe my stuff has been actively uploaded the whole time, but we'll find out.
Yeah. Oh, also. Oh, yours just has a C. I don't know how you did that, but mine, it like takes a thumbnail of you, and it just waits until you're just taken by surprise, and it just takes the most unflattering image of you.
Oh yeah, I've got one. Oh, I can press it though. You can press it to take another photo.
Okay. Yeah.
Or something like that, which is cool. So I can change mine around, I guess.
Mine appears to be like, so
You would think
that's
there'd be
great.
some kind of AI in there, the way that with a Google Pixel camera now that'll find the best photo and stitch them all together. You'd think they'd have some way of doing that, but I'm sure that's down the
Yeah,
pipeline.
no. It's quite the opposite, even.
Yeah,
It feels like it's trolling me on
trying to
purpose.
find the worst one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. This is great. Yeah. So, I mean, do you think you'll use this content for anything, or this is just kind of a testing it out, or?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to. I'm trying to figure out. I'm probably going to turn it into a few different things. We could try just uploading it mostly as is and see what people think about that. You don't get the retention, but like, we might end up. People might end up really
Just liking
liking
the
that.
conversation. Yeah.
I think that we can sort of chop it up into little bits for social media.
Yeah. Well, also, like, there's just more energy when it's a conversation than when it's a script, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just like, it's more natural. People believe what they're saying. They're, I mean, their delivery is better because it's their real voice. So I feel like if you're trying to get, especially for like social media and clips and things like that, I feel like conversations are definitely the way to go.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't know. There's something unnatural about trying to read the names of methods, and they're just like a bunch of words like strung together. And whenever you're trying to describe steps to do something, you're sort of saying it maybe a little slower than you normally would, and you're trying to like enunciate
Which works in some use cases, like if you're trying to like watch a getting started tutorial in certain ways. But if you're trying to like see real human engagement and thoughts and excitement about a product, it's a little bit different, I feel like, sometimes.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I gotta hop. I gotta grab some lunch, but this is great. I'm happy to hop onto one of these anytime too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.